Well, we're here to discuss two potential zeitgeists: battery renaissance, the whole new lithium-ion batteries which are going into cars but also into domestic and grid installations. And we're talking about travel and leisure, with all the medium-term prospects that has for growth. So I'd like to begin, Valerie, perhaps if you could give us some thoughts perhaps about the whole battery renaissance.
Well, battery has been quite a disappointment in the past years, especially because there was an overproduction with regard to a quite disappointing demand, which was not there to the producer's expectation. Now, I think this has changed. Obviously, the new generation of lithium batteries are much better. Their autonomy has increased. You see a lot of demand from car manufacturers getting into the electric cars, and that's very important, of course, to support that. We see also regulation becoming much more tight in many cities, London, Paris, for example, but others too, to use and shift to electric vehicles. I think these 2 points makes it that demand will now start to increase quite dramatically, and indeed we have production to satisfy that demand.
I mean, to me, what's very interesting is that we went through rather a bad patch in terms of demand for electric vehicles and hence for batteries. And that has been pretty bad for nearly a couple of years, but things seem to be getting better now, I think, on exactly the point you've made about the better distance for cars, really.
Yes, I mean, that's what will convince consumers at the end of the day, that they can drive for a rather long distance without having to recharge. And I think that's what we're getting. And again, with prices have come off their highs, we have an opportunity here.
I think that's very important. The prices of these companies are down, but beginning to pick up from the lows, but still well below the previous highs. Christine, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the travel sector.
Well, I think the travel sector is very interesting because it's so diverse, obviously geographically, but also in terms of the activities it covers. And of course, we're seeing a world where, despite relatively mild growth overall, incomes still are rising. More and more people are moving into the middle class. And there's almost been a huge mobilisation, if you like, of people coming, particularly from Asia, elsewhere in the world. And those flows are really driving the travel and tourist industry at the moment. And I think will continue to do so.
Tell us a little bit about the actual way you invest. I mean, if you're buying a diversified portfolio of European travel and leisure companies, what kind of exposure that are you getting within that?
Well, I think obviously some things are going to be very, very cyclical. So, for example, the airlines are going to be, affected by the changing oil price and so on. But then you have other players, say Compass, who does industrial catering, and they're a sort of contractual provider, so they're a much more stable stock within a portfolio, and that does help to offset the volatility of some of the other areas.
It's very interesting. So you are actually getting quite a nice balance between those two.
I think it's possible,
yeah,
yes.
And still exposure to growth as well.
Yes, because you've got new areas of, I mean, you think of the hotel segment, you've got, traditional hotels on the one hand, but then you've got new players, like Airbnb and things like that, which are, quite different and give opportunities.
All right, now, Stefan, here we've got two very, very different portfolios. Both Werthstein has a solution for both of those, a portfolio of companies that are based in the whole battery area, but also a fund that gives exposure to the European travel and leisure sector. Tell us about valuation across those two rather different sectors.
Travel and leisure is very easy, as pointed out by me, so it's low, and with 14.5 lower than the average of the European market, so there's potential to catch up. That's the price-earning ratio, exactly. If you look on the batteries, price-earning ratio as the normally used valuation model is not so easy, because price-earning ratio is just capturing the companies that are in profits. But there you have a lot of companies who are making losses. So it's more fair for the valuation to look on the valuation to cash flow model, because cash flow every company has. And if you look there, you see that the valuation is not higher than the average of the Nasdaq valuation. In average, yes, but in medium it's lower. Nasdaq in medium is 2 12.1, and batteries is 8.9. So we cannot say that there is a bubble or an enormous valuation. So it's it's interesting in the moment to reinvest in that industry.
I think this is very, very interesting. So really both of these two potential Zeitgeists are looking reasonably attractive in terms of the valuation. And if I look at the price dynamics, although, as I've said, the price of the battery companies is starting to come up, it's still well below previous peak. And for those tourism companies, they're actually also quite a bit below their previous peak, having come off a bit in the course of this year. So I think two very interesting opportunities. Let's now move on to the Zeitgeist vote. And I'd like to begin, Valerie, if you'd be kind enough, with your view.
Well, Giles, with this portfolio analysis, I think I would go definitely for the tourism, because I think this is really the safest for me at this very moment because of the valuation and because I believe the dollar will go up. And that's where European portfolio makes sense for me.
Thank you. Stefan.
So I don't believe that the dollar will go up, but that's not the reason why I'm for batteries. I like the travel and leisure, but I think the potential in batteries is much bigger there. I can imagine a hockey stick growth.
Thank you. And Christine.
Like Stefan, I see lots of long-term potential in batteries, but like Valerie, I'm going with the travel because it's a safer option.
I'm always a risk taker here.
That is also true.
And equally, I'm not.
Well, look, I also feel obviously torn between these options, but on balance, I am going for the batteries, and I'm doing that because I do think that has got really much more long-term growth. I think the travel will grow, but not as fast. And I accept, as Stefan, you've said, it will be more volatile in the batteries, but I think one just has to go with that. Now, this just gives us, an issue here where we've got two of the Werthstein Institute going one way and two the other way, but we do have a rule for dealing with that, and that rule is that my vote as the chairman, it acts as a casting vote, and so on that basis, it is the batteries that win the Zeitgeist vote. So thank you everybody very much for the discussion. And now to summarise, so Battery Renaissance is the new Zeitgeist for this month. And we do have a Werthstein portfolio of companies which you can invest in. And those companies, we do believe, are at reasonably attractive valuations as far as one can value these kinds of companies. And we also note that they are starting to rise again, but still not as high as they were before, suggesting a potentially good entry point.